see but pride in singularity. Oh, never mind if men are wrong, so long as they are free. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone. Claim the power within you, ever to be mine. The world may change or disappear, but truth can never die. Come, you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone.
Today's reading is taken from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. Week 31. How democratic is truth? Realize one and eternal, with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. We live in an age when people assume that knowledge should be available equally to all, in matters susceptible of judgment by normal common sense. However, everyone knows there are exceptions. Access to a control room for intercontinental missiles is limited by universal consent to a very few. Access to control of a passenger liner is limited to those with the necessary knowledge for operating them, and also for those with the proper authorization. If people don't see the disadvantage of making more subtle knowledge universally available, it is only because they are ignorant of the risk involved. In the case of subtle knowledge, the main disadvantage in making universally available is the harm it might do to one who isn't ready for it, and who might even mock it. True, by mocking truth, he might undermine the truth of a few truth seekers, but then such tests can also be beneficial as a means of strengthening faith. Again true, the clever doubter's misrepresentation of those truths may dissuade a few seekers from following the spiritual path. But if a seeker really is sincere, he will recognize the true truth eventually, and it resonates with his own being. No, the greatest problem accrues to the shallow doubter himself. To give him an opportunity to affirm his ignorance might only estrange him even more from the truth, delaying the time when he will turn, as all people must, eventually to the light. Thus, the scripture advises not secrecy, but discretion in sharing of truth. Jesus Christ says in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7, "Give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. And Sri Krishna says in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, never speak of these truths to one who is without self-control or devotion, who renders no service, who does not care to hear or to speak ill of me. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Everyone, how is everybody? Good, me too. For those who don't know us, my name is Nayaswami Daiva, and this is Nayaswami Surendra, and we feel privileged to be here together with you all. There was a little girl in Sunday school who was very, very busy coloring. And the teacher came over and she said, "Honey, what are you coloring?" And she looked up and she says, "I'm making a picture of God." And the teacher looked down and says, "Honey, nobody knows what God looks like." And she looked up and said, "In a minute they will." How often are we sure that we know what God looks like? Are we sure that we know what's supposed to be happening in this world? There was Stephen Covey he was a great soul. He did a lot to help people kind of organize their lives and get in touch with deeper currents of life. He wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and stuff, but he would often start a talk. He would come in and he would say, and he was often, usually speaking inside closed rooms, and he would say, "Who here knows which direction is north?" About 2/3 of the people would raise their hands. And then he would say, "Okay, who here is absolutely certain they know which way is north?" And about 1/3 of the people would leave their hands up. He'd say, "Okay, now close your eyes, stand up, and turn and point north." And he had people pointing in every direction every single time. We are so certain that we know how life works. We are so assured that we have got it dialed in. We know where happiness comes from. We know what's supposed to happen. We know who's supposed to be elected. We know if it was just like that, then everybody could be happy. Then I could be happy and everything would just work. But life is more complex than that. And truth is more complex than that. And the things that life presents us with are more complex than that. I'm going to read a little bit. I actually did some meditating, and I really felt like Master wanted, Yogananda, God wanted some real thoughts held out this morning. So I'm going to do what I don't usually do. I'm going to actually use a little bit of a reference point. There was a woman in World War II. She was born in the late 1800s, so she was middle-aged, but she was Dutch. And does anybody here know the name Corrie ten Boom? Okay. Well, she was a great hero. They were Dutch, very, very devout family. And Dad was a watchmaker, daughter grew up as a watchmaker. There's a couple of stories from her life. They did an enormous amount to help Jews escape Nazi persecution during World War II. Very heroic. She was actually, the family was, in fact, imprisoned in concentration camps as a byproduct of that effort. But when she was growing up, she tells in her story something really sweet. She was probably about 10 years old or something, and the question of sexuality and pornography and things came across the radar of her consciousness. So a little girl. And she went to her father and she said, "Dad, can you help me understand this? Tell me what these things are." And her father didn't answer for a moment or two, and he said, "Honey, I want you to go over and I want you to fill up the suitcase." And so she said, "Okay." And she filled up the suitcase and he said, "Now I want you to haul it upstairs." And she filled it with books and stuff. I can't remember what it was, but it was heavy. And she looked at him and said, "Dad, I'm only 10 years old. I can't carry that heavy thing upstairs." He said, "The same thing is true about information. What you're asking is too heavy for you to carry for now. So I will carry it for you until you're strong enough to be able to carry it for yourself." Think about that. Isn't that beautiful? We grow into an increasing understanding of what's true. And we use our time on earth, if we're wise, to spend our time exploring what's true. Now, every one of us, every single one of us is here on this planet because we're trying to figure out, where does joy come from, right? Where does happiness come from? Where does my connection with life come from? And how do I anchor myself in that so it's not just a passing thing? And every one of us has got different answers. And if I asked you right now, look at your answers, how's that working for you? You know, and most of us would say, well, so-so. You know, unless, in fact, you are living in joy all the time, no matter what, the answer is you probably don't have the right answers in a lot of cases. And we don't know. There's a story of the owner of Wrigley's chewing gum on a plane, and somebody was sitting next to him, and she was talking, and she discovered who he was. And she said, "You spend an awful lot on advertising." And he said, "Well, yeah, I do, actually. I probably spend twice as much as I need. I just don't know which half to cut." And that's the problem with us. You know, by the time you're in this room, you have an enormous capacity for understanding how life works. But unless your picture's up on this wall, there's things you still don't understand, because these guys have got it figured out. So we're trying to figure out, what is it that they know that we don't? And the issue is, we know that probably half of what we know, some huge chunk of what we know, isn't really helping us. We just don't know which half to throw out. We just don't know which half to get rid of. And so the masters give us the teachings. They guide us. They give us support. And one of the things that they say is that God exists as a consciousness. It's always there. It is made of joy. It is made of love. It is made of wisdom and power. It's made of peace and calmness. It is the very source of everything that you're looking for. You come from that, you're made of that, and you've just forgotten. And that by focusing on that, all things come into appropriate expression for the goodness of all, because essentially God is good. Every saint, every master tells us the same story, no matter what their religion, no matter what their race, no matter what age they spoke in. So, what are the examples? What kinds of things do we have to look toward that help us to understand that this works and how it works? The promise of a spiritual life, the promise of being in tune with God, is not that life is going to look particularly good. Look at the lives of all the masters, and you'll see that their lives were filled with incredible adversity all along the way. So if a spiritual life doesn't give us the benefit of a nice, cushy life and ease and happiness through that, what is its promise, and what is it that it can offer? What is it that it gives us? There's a very sweet story, again, from the life of Corrie ten Boom. I don't know if sweet is right. She and her family were in concentration camps. Her father perished there. She and her sister were side by side, sharing the same camp, and her sister ended up dying. But Corrie, then they would gather people. They would pray together. There was actually one story where the particular place in the concentration camp where they were housed was infested with fleas, so desperately that it was driving everybody insane. I mean, just literally, just no break from it. But they would gather every day, and they would pray. They would tune into God. They would listen for the presence. They would find themselves in an uplifted state, going past the outer circumstances. And at one point, they were gathered in prayer, and they were supposed to be out working. And the Gestapo were coming through, and the head of the camps were coming through. And, you know, they were just merciless, and they would torture and beat, and any infraction, any opportunity. And they were coming along and inspecting the different barracks. And they came to their barracks, and they were in there praying. And Corrie's sister had said that even the fleas were God's creatures, and they were a blessing. And Corrie had always kind of gone, yeah, right. So the Gestapo were coming through, and they started to go into their cell, and they would have found them. They would have beaten them or killed them on sight. And the guide who was taking them through, the sergeant or whatever, they started to go in. He says, let's not go in here. The fleas are so bad, we just don't want to even bother. And again, it was an example. Corrie was a tremendous number of murders, genocide happened inside this camp. She was released on a clerical error 1 week before everyone in her age group was exterminated. Think about that. Think about just how unlikely such a thing was. And she spent the rest of her time, again, continuing to serve. But we don't know. We told the story earlier, and this is actually cute. We have 2 services, and we often overlap them. There's often things going on in both of them that relate to each other. We told the story earlier of Swami Kriyananda, the founder of Ananda, was at Disneyland with several people. And they were on the Pirates of the Caribbean, I think. It was one of those boat rides that has, you're in a canoe, 2 of you, and you're going along, and all kinds of things happen. You're in this channel, and there's a little steering wheel on your boat and stuff. And Swami was steering the boat. They were in the boat, and the thing looped back on itself, and the friends were coming this way, and Swami was going that way, and he waved over. He said, "Hi, how's it going? Is this fun?" And the husband of the other, I knew they were European. The husband of the other craft was busy steering, and he says, "Not now, I've got to steer." He was really focused. Well, of course, the thing's on a track. And what the masters all tell us is that God knows what he's doing. This is his dream, it's not our dream. We can't just go to sleep. We can't just coast along and think that anything's going to happen. Because the goal of the dream is to wake us up, to make us more aware of God's reality as our reality. So we have to become increasingly aware, increasingly present, increasingly attentive, and concentrated, and engaged. But we also have to stop pretending that we're steering the darn boat. If you get on the boat and you just close your eyes and go to sleep, you'll have the ride, but at the end of it, nothing will have happened. The goal of it is to be present with all the moments and all the surprises and all the things, and it's all an illusion. And at the end of it, what we discover is that there was goodness all along the way. Even the times that were so horrific bring contradistinction to light. They contrast. They make people choose what's more important. There was a woman who is referred to in the autobiography of Yogananda's autobiography. Her name is Giri Bala, and she was a woman who had some real problems. She was not liked by her in-laws. She had a hard time growing up. She took comfort. She handled her stress by eating. And so by the time she was fairly young in her adult life, she was extraordinarily obese. And she was mocked and harangued by her in-laws. It was humiliating. She didn't know what to do with herself. And so she said, her mother often warned, "Child, try to control your greed. When the time comes for you to live among strangers and your husband's family, what will they think of you?" The calamity she had foreseen came to pass. I was only 12 when I joined my husband's people. My mother-in-law shamed me morning, noon, and night with my gluttonous behaviors. Her scoldings were a blessing in disguise, however. They roused my dormant spiritual tendencies. One morning, her ridicule was merciless. "I shall soon prove to you," I said, stung to the quick, "that I shall never touch food again as long as I live." "Lord," I prayed incessantly, she says, "please send me a guru, one who can teach me to live by thy light and not by food." A divine ecstasy fell over me. I set out for a place on the Ganges to learn. On my way, I encountered a priest of my husband's family. She says to him, "Kindly tell me how to live without eating." And he stared at me without reply. Finally, he spoke in a consoling manner. "Child, come to the temple this evening. I will conduct a special Vedic ceremony for you." This vague answer was not the one I was seeking, she says. I continued toward the ghat, the steps. The morning sun pierced the waters. I purified myself in the Ganges as though for a sacred initiation. And as I left the riverbank, my wet cloth around me in the broad glare of the day, my master materialized before me. He says, "Dear little one, I am the guru sent by God to fulfill your urgent prayer." He was deeply touched by its unusual nature and the deep concentration of my prayer. From today you shall live by astral light, your bodily atoms fed by the infinite current. She says that there's no magic. She talks about, it's 50 years now since she hasn't eaten anything by the time Master's writing this, Yogananda's writing this. She says, I sleep very little. I meditate night and at night, attending my domestic duties in daytime. I slightly feel the change in climate from season to season. I've never been sick or experienced any disease. I feel only slight pain when accidentally injured. I can control my heart and breathing. I often see my guru as well as other great souls in vision. And then Yogananda, this would be our thought too, right? Yogananda says to her, he says, why don't you teach others the method of living without food? Think about what great benefit would be if we didn't have starvation because people knew how to live without food. And he says, my ambitions for the world's starving millions were nipped in the bud. No, she says. I was strictly commanded by my guru not to divulge the secret. It is not his wish to tamper with God's drama of creation. And then he goes on to talk about how in this age we are learning to live together. We are learning to work with each other. If you take out that compulsion to connect, to serve each other, to see the consequences of not cooperating, not being good with each other, we don't learn, we don't grow. So people are always faced with the choice. Am I generous? Do I care for others? Do I offer food? Do I offer nurturance? Or do I stay selfish and let others suffer? And that very drama is what causes us to grow. It's not appropriate that we should have every bit of information available to us all the time because we're not ready for it. We don't understand. Same thing is true with the teachings of this path, you know. Kriya is only offered after people have spent a year or two of deep preparation and self-offering. First thing that's taught is concentration. And then how to use energy. Those two things first. We have to develop in the power of those things before we can go into the inner world. So the third thing that's taught is the inner practice of Om, of communion. And then those things combined together, practiced night and day, week after week, month after month, preparing ourselves, strengthening ourselves, getting in tune with that inner world that's always there for us, but we ignore, then we can be ready for Kriya. Swami once said, people said, why don't you teach Kriya to everybody? He said, because if you're not ready, it won't work for you. And then when you have developed spiritually far enough, when you're ready, people will say, why don't you take Kriya? And you'll say, no, I already tried that, it didn't work for me. It's that we miss the point, we lose the power. We have there's a little story of a man who was in his meditation room. And we're going to start to move into the conversation about concentration because it's not just being in the game. It's not just going subconsciously along. It's being completely engaged. There's a story of a man who was at his meditation altar in the morning, and God came to him. And God said, outside of your hut, there's a large boulder. I want you to push on it. So the man went out and he started pushing on the boulder. And every day he would get up and he would spend the day pushing on that boulder. 20 years later, God sees him weeping at his altar. And God appears to him and says, my son, what's wrong? He says, 20 years ago you came to me, you asked me to move that boulder. Every day, all day, I've been spending my time trying to move that boulder, and I haven't done it, and I'm a failure. And God says, I didn't ask you to move the boulder. I asked you to push on the boulder. And what's developed inside of you is persistence, constancy, self-offering. You become incredibly strong and powerful from working against this great force. That's all I had in mind for you. That's the gift I had. We don't know. There's a beautiful song that Swami Kriyananda wrote, and a phrase in it is, the battles they fight, he's talking about people, the battles they fight, the victories they win are never the victories they know. We don't know what's going on. We have to show up. We have to tune in. We have to listen for God's guidance. We have to listen for a larger understanding. Then we have to apply ourselves. And gradually with that application, gradually with receptivity and concentration, we start to discover for ourselves that there's something going on. That all the things that we think are mistakes are opportunities. That all the things that we think are broken are just life trying to find its way, and souls globally everywhere trying to step into the next level of understanding. It's always good if we can cooperate with God's grace. It's always nice if we can be nice with each other and care for each other and, see the light in all our differences. But even mistaking those things, the pain of doing stupid things often brings to us the understanding of how things can really be better. So in this election year, in this year of trial and testing, let's think about ourselves and how we're standing. Are we sure we know which way is north? Are we absolutely certain we know which way is north? Are we certain that we know how to navigate? Are we alert? Are we listening? Are we staying in the moment? Are we concentrating on the things that are right in front of us? Because God isn't far away. He's not someplace else. He's right here, right now. And He's trying to help us in each moment make choices that bring increasing satisfaction and wholeness to all of us. Concentration is the answer. There's a beautiful affirmation that I've used for many, many years now. And until this morning even, I've always had a part of it upside down. It's perfect peace and poise are mine today, as I concentrate all my power and ability upon expressing the divine will. And I've always seen it as I carry peace and poise into that, expressing the divine will. But it's actually upside down. As I concentrate on expressing the divine will, the byproduct of that is peace and poise. That the more I concentrate on that presence of God, on that truth, on that nobility, on that beauty, on that self-offering, on that kindness, the more peace and poise belong to me. This is from Whispers from Eternity, number 17, prayer before practicing concentration. This is our last, let's take it inward. Teach me, O Spirit, by meditation, to stop the storm of breath, the skipping of my mental restlessness, and all the sensory disturbances that rage on the lake of my mind. Let the magic wand of my intuition halt the gale of passions and unnecessary desires. In the rippleless lake of my mind, then, let me behold the undistorted reflection of the moon of my soul, glistening ever with the reflected light of thy presence.
Is based on the words of Paramahansa Yogananda, one of his Whispers from Eternity, written by a musician at the Ananda Village, Mukti. It's called Keep Calling Him.
Keep calling him, keep calling him, keep calling him. Whether he replies or not, keep calling him. In the temple of unceasing prayer, believe that he's approaching there. And call to him, keep calling him. Thou dost know I'm praying, Lord, you know I love no other. I'll speak not, nor ask when to expect from you an answer. You know my heart. I'll call to thee. The candles of my joys are dimly burning now.